the lives of people who've experienced the kinds of things we've been talking about all week. So that's what we will be doing with that video, and lots of time for discussion. We're planning to end right at 12 noon today. Okay, so let's start.
Okay. And before I put on the video, which I and a colleague called the park bench, I want to emphasize that learning about others starts with learning about ourselves. And so whether it is that we're learning about diversity, or learning about anti-racism, or learning about multicultural anything, it begins with a look at who am I and where I'm coming from. And I think we're going to be encouraging you throughout the day to consider that. Consider your personal responses to the images and your personal responses to the words that you see and hear. Before I do that, I want to share with you one of my very favorite quotes from Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi said, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." So change begins with each and every one of us. Thoughts on watching this scene. I have trouble hearing, and seriously. And so my request is that you either speak really loudly or sit a bit forward.
Why don't you take the mic to them if somebody has a question?
You just saw in that video.
Powerful message. They did a good job of sharing a powerful message. Short, effective.
I do have a request. All of this is being recorded for the journal. And to be also very cooperative. Pamela, this is one of those times I don't want to feel uncomfortable, but we really need to do this. You'd be so kind to do so. And then she doesn't have to walk all the way to the microphone to get you on that. All of you is so kind to support Pamela that way. And we do want you recorded. Your comments are very important to us as a journal. And so I just really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony.
Stretch yourself and sit next to each other.
Carry alcohol.
Get out of your box.
Any other comments? Students usually tell me that this is even though it's a very short clip, it's a very powerful clip and a very powerful message, and so they usually say they need time to absorb and to digest and to think about things. So if you think of something while we're talking or while the other video is on, just write it down and we can go back to it later. Okay? So having shared that first video, I want to introduce the next video to you. Do you get the feeling that I don't like mics? Okay, as Jerry said earlier, the next video is called The Way Home. And it was developed, created by World Trust Organization, which, as far as I know, is out of San Francisco. And I think I have some other details about World Trust that I can share with you later. And in 1994, the World Trust Organization launched what they called heart-to-heart conversations. And this was a national program of public dialogue designed to help people share deep feelings about race and culture. And through the conversations, participants were encouraged to look deeply within themselves and to discover and recognize their embedded assumptions and to challenge those assumptions as part of the process of transformation. Now, the definition that they used of transformation and transformative learning is, and I quote, "Transformative learning is more than the accumulation of additional information. Transformation means experiencing a deep shift in the basic premises of thoughts, feelings, and actions. It shifts the seat of consciousness. And when this shift takes place, the lens through which we see is dramatically and permanently altered." And so transformation does what it says it will do. It transforms us, and we're never, ever the same. And then in 1997, World Trust launched what it called the Women's Video Project. And over the course of 8 months, 64 women representing a cross-section of cultures in America came together to share their experiences of oppression. And they shared these experiences of oppression through the lens of race. There was diversity in the groups, or diversity relating to age, class, education, sexual identity, and so on. And what you'll see are 8 ethnic councils talking about the issues. The ethnic councils are indigenous, and they're clearly identified in the video. Indigenous, African American, Arab, Asian, European American, Jewish, Latina, and multiracial. And through these ethnic councils, the women explored their stories of identity, oppression, and resistance. Now, section 1 to 8 of the video consists of introductions to each of the 8 ethnic councils. And then sections 9 to 21 are topics of conversation. And so you see the women talking about these various topics. And the topics, and again, these will be clearly outlined in the video. The topics are controlling the land, power, silence, and privilege, am I this or am I that, becoming American and what that means, finding identity, individual reality versus cultural reality, internalized oppression, school stories, standards of beauty, experiences from light to dark, and what that means is skin color and skin color privilege, institutionalized oppression, relationships, and then a very uplifting end piece called consciousness and healing. You'll find that the video raises questions rather than answers questions. And it's meant to be a jumping off point for self-awareness and future dialogue, rather than a definitive statement on any one of the issues. World Trust says that this video is for people who are sensitive to issues of social justice and who are willing to engage in examination of our own histories and prejudices, although that may not be comfortable. And it's essential that we look within for our own answers. And it's equally essential that we look outside at the institutionalized oppression and violence that have kept us separate from each other. When I show this video to my counseling students, I tell them that the women in this video could be their clients. And they have a unique opportunity to have a glimpse into the lives of their clients. I also tell my students that they would never be privy to any of these conversations unless you yourself were from one of these ethnic groups, because the level of sharing is extremely deep, and there's been trust developed in the groups for them to be able to share the depth that they share. And so you're like a fly on the wall listening to these women talk about the things, their daily lived experiences that most of us wouldn't know about, and the things that have shaped them and continue to shape their lives. So it's like eavesdropping on conversations. And I also share with my students that I have been privy to many of these conversations. And so the things that they share touch me personally on a very deep level. So let's show the video.
So what we'll do is we'll take a break about halfway through, and it'll probably be what we call a walking break. We'll give you some concept to talk about, or it may just be what stood out the most in the beginning part of the video. And then we'll come back and probably take a 15-minute break, maybe 20. Does anyone know if there's a place here where you can get coffee or something? Is there anything open on Saturday, Tony?
I'm not sure if that's I'll check.
Okay. And then we'll come back, watch the rest of the video, and then open it up for discussion. Okay.
What I would ask you to do is to make a note of any words or phrases or statements or images that remain with you, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So make some notes about what has meaning for you as you watch the video.
It's a great video, but it's very potent. So just kind of, if you need to doodle while you're watching it or whatever, it'll all come in by osmosis.
That's right. So take care of yourself as you watch the video. If you feel you need to think for a moment,
Did you rewind this?
yes, that's the video. That should be the beginning.
Yeah. How's the sound? Louder? You want to conform it a little bit? Yeah, because everybody's confusing. Oh,
We need to talk to each other. We need to hear the different ways of what we follow in the world. How can we do that and not deaden our hearts? How can we do that and not make our skin 1,000 inches thick? To accept that Christopher Columbus discovered America and that this is a big old melting pot. You know, you get here, wherever you're from, whoever you think you are, you're just an American now, and it's the same for everybody. That's a lie, lie, lie.
Indian isn't even a word. My daughters have a fit about that. You know, they go, Native Americans, what is it? We're not Indians, we're not Native Americans. We're indigenous people to this area.
I'm from the Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma.
Homo from, okay.
I'm Inuit. I'm San Carlos Apache.
All the time that I was growing up till I was about 12 or 13, like I said, that was like 1956, I was sent to live in a white home down here in the city, according to the sisters, to take out all the savageness that was in me. That's what the Catholic nun said. While I was there, I pretended to be white, which made me feel really bad, but it's like when you're in Rome, do as the Romans, and
We were brainwashed by the colonialism mentality. The Spaniards came to the Americas, and all the natives, whether we came mixed or not, that was the standard, to be white in that society.
What is Latina? Latina represents so many countries, so many cultures.
44 countries, 88 cultures. We are certainly very diverse.
Native American, Chicana,
Cuban American,
Chicana India, Chicana Mexicana,
Chicana Mexicana, Afro-Cuban,
Puerto Riqueña,
Latina, Chicana,
American with Mexican descent,
Chicana, Latina, Puerto Riqueña, Mexicana.
When I think about my grandmother and what she pushed for her kids to be educated, because then you were going to be treated better, because if you acted like an Indio or an India, then you're going to be mistreated. And yeah, that sense of, even though she wasn't India herself, she wanted her kids not to necessarily identify with that aspect of who she was, which is very sad.
My grandmother taught me no culture, and she taught my mother no culture. She was afraid to teach me anything because of her own fear of being beaten for her language and her ceremonies. And I knew she was one of the greatest basket weavers that there was in our tribe, but I didn't do basket weaving. My mother didn't do basket weaving. That's how much of the oppression of her time had taken out of her. She taught us how to gather acorns. She taught us how to pick seaweed. She told us how to prepare it. She told us how to save it. But she never told us that there were songs and ceremonies that go with that. I talk more now to my grandmother than when she was alive. Because now she has the freedom to tell me everything without the fear that I'm going to be hurt from it.
I grew up in a little tiny village in Colorado, very isolated. And my grandma on my mother's side was half Navajo, but she never told us she was. She was married to a Frenchman, and they were very quick to say French, but never Indian.
It's the Indio. It's the Indian part of us. You know, and you're saying it's the African part of us. So it's any part of us that isn't Gachupin, that isn't Espanol, that isn't European, is despreciado.
Remember how we lined ourselves up according to skin color? We talked about how we felt when we were in those places in the line.
My great-grandmother was constantly on me about the fact that I had the nappiest hair of the three of the daughters, but thank God I had the lightest skin. You know, and she was very proud of her long hair and her light skin, and, you know, make sure you pinch that nose so it was nice and straight, just like my nose, just like my nose. Come to find out as an adult that my great-grandmother was the product of a rape, that her father raped her mother. And this is why she was half white, and to still take that on as something, because of the color she was and because of how her hair was, as something to be proud of, and to pass that on, not just to your children, not to just to your grandchildren, but to your great-grandchildren, to your great-grandchildren.
Generation.
You know, that's a long line of that.
Identity is a big problem in our community. We don't love ourselves. We don't like the way we look. We don't know about our history. We don't know about our contribution to America. You know, we've been trying to buy into this paradigm of beauty, this paradigm of how we can make it in America, and that's not going to get anywhere, because as soon as you get in there, you're either the token of representation, and if you start to get out of line, again, you will be put in your place.
My people come from Ireland, Scotland, England, and Germany.
England, Ireland,
Britain, and Scotland, Germany, the Netherlands, Ireland.
From Germany, England, Sweden, France, Italian, French, and Irish, Lithuanian, Polish, and French Canadian.
Primarily Dutch and German and English.
Australian? I'm adopted, so I don't know my ancestry.
I'm Lithuanian and Austrian, and as you all know, I had a problem with the ancestral part, primarily because I didn't feel a connection. At some level of consciousness, I always know I'm part of the colonization and the invasion and the oppression, but that I keep that out of sight and out of mind.
You cannot not be racist. It's in our water. It's in the air that we breathe. It's the world that we were born into. The world that we were born into. My mental picture of a racist is this big white guy, you know, saying all this stuff and being mean and making slanderous remarks and blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, well, that's not me. That's not me. Where does racism show up for me? I know it's in there. Where is it? That scares the hell out of me. Who am I hurting? What am I doing?
I think a lot of times we don't know what we're saying. And by we, I do mean white people. I mean, I've thought about like talk shows and stuff and listening to people of color all pissed off and, you know, you're just ignorant. And I would think, well, I'm in the clear there because I know I'm not a racist, I'm not ignorant. Well, I'm really ignorant. So I sort of felt down about that, and then I got really excited because what that means is all the stuff you don't know, then that means there's all that stuff you get to learn.
My people are from Eastern Europe, from Poland and Russia, Austria, Poland, Baghdad, Russia, Spain, and then Turkey. Raised in Israel.
My family has lived in Iraq for 3,000 years, and I'm actually mixed heritage. My mom has been identifying as an Iraqi Jew for the past 34 years, but grew up as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, whose family came over on the Mayflower. And we don't have any African Jews with us. We don't have Ethiopian Jews with us. And that's a very important piece that we're missing. The Mizrahim are indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. They were in ancient Israel, they were in Egypt as slaves, they went back to ancient Israel, they got exiled into Babylon. Many stayed in Babylon, and then others from there spread throughout the Middle East and North Africa, so they've never left the region. The term Sephardi means Jews who were in Spain during the Moorish period. They were exiled in 1482 with the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition. They settled throughout the Ottoman Empire, which today encompasses countries such as Greece, Turkey, also Middle Eastern, North African countries such as Egypt and Morocco.
Ashkenazi Jews are Jews who were exiled to Europe and have moved, I think, through different periods in history to different parts of Europe. Russia, Poland, there's Germans and Anglo-Saxons also.
Ashkenazim for matters of survival in many, many periods, like to not be killed, and then later when periods were good for the matters of status. The goal was to be as white, as European, as non-Semitic as possible. I feel that it leads to a crisis in Jewish identity that is not discussed, namely that like desperation to oppress, to squash, to detach from anything Mizrahi or Sephardi comes from an oppression that, you know, a few hundred years before, they were the same skin color as we were.
They call us shchorim, which means black. All of you black are from the same. We don't care, Morocco, Iraq.
The Ashkenazis there.
Yeah. The humiliation, I guess, or something about, you know, where you come from and what are you eating, or you're primitive. And yeah, it was just the way that the teachers treated us. It was in the air, and the buses would go. I remember one woman who came to my mother's door. I was home, I was about 15, and there was a mezuzah on the door. My mother opens the door. First thing the woman says to my mother is, "Why do you have a mezuzah on your door?" And my mother says, "You're Jewish." And the woman says, "What kind of Jew are you?" And my mother said, "Sephardic." And the woman said, "Oh, well, you're not a real Jew." And the next time this woman called, my mother said, "I'm sorry, I'm going into business." And that's how she would get rid of customers she didn't like, because she wasn't confrontational, and she wouldn't say, "Yeah, you really are a stupid bitch."
mountain of lies that grow from the initial story. They made love, wild and abandoned love, and I was the product of that.
One kid just screamed out, you know, Rose isn't your mama, your mama's
My
wife.
black father had been a secret from me as I had been a secret from
And
him.
my mother told me that her mother and father and her 8 brothers and sisters were in a car accident, and their car got hit by a train. And they all died.
I think I always suspected there was something different, but I didn't
So she
know
taught
what.
me 2 things. One is not to talk about death, and the other one is not to talk about her family.
I was given to my father's parents when I was 2 days old and grew up believing that my African American grandparents were my parents.
And my mother did decide to keep me and care for me. And with that decision, I became, cut off from my black family then for 12 years.
One of my most vivid memories of my father is him stealing me in the middle of the night, but my mother catching him and the police taking me out of the car. And then I spent the next maybe 5 years with my mom, who said things like racism doesn't exist anymore. She, as a single parent, had a hard time, with 2 kids, and so she gave us to a foster family, to a Jehovah's Witness family. They came knocking on the door, and were doing their preaching, and they were willing to take my sister and I on.
At age 14, I came to meet my mother and then eventually live with her, and I was thrown into white culture. I found myself just like being enraged and hating my white grandparents when I would go visit them, and they wouldn't introduce me to their friends. Their friends would walk up and they'd be very hurried, and I just thought, I hate these white people. I hate them, and why were they willing? And the only way I can describe it is to take the risk to be uncomfortable. I felt like there was this real secretive part of me that wanted to be with white people so that I could just dig at them all the time, just poke at them, and just shove my blackness in their face and shove my pain in their face.
Yes, we are not invisible. No, I'm not from Tokyo, Singapore, or Saigon. No, your dogs are safe with me. No, I don't invade the park for squirrel meat. No, I'm very bad at math. No, I do not answer to Geisha Girl, China Doll, Susie Wong, Mama-san, or Gook, Jap, Chink.
In terms of nationality, I'm an American. In terms of racial or ethnicity, I'm Filipino.
I was born in Canton, China. I came to the U.S. in 1987.
Born and raised in Sri Lanka. I've been in San Francisco since 1983.
My mother is from Japan, and my father's from Mississippi.
Born in India, I've lived in Kuwait and in London and in Washington, D.C.
I'm Chinese Indonesian. I was born in Queens, New York.
I was born in San Francisco, and I'm Indian.
Both of my parents who raised me are Chinese, so I always say that I'm Chinese, and then I say I'm from Vietnam. It's very hard for me to accept myself as Vietnamese because within the Asian culture, especially in Vietnam, Chinese and Vietnamese have like a big internal classism, racism.
If I must identify, I would say, if I'm forced to, I would say Asian and American, not Asian American, Asian and. Yes, I'm a woman of color. Yes, I'm bisexual. Yes, I'm an immigrant woman. That's very important to me, that I'm an immigrant woman. I continue to call myself an immigrant woman because I think we are almost blocked into some group of monolingual people who only, take money from the country.
I go to live in the Philippines for 4 years. It's a choice that I made.
And I come back and I'm like, wow, I can't find a job. I'm not thinking in English, I'm thinking in Tagalog. When I went to look for a job, it was so classic. I got offered a janitorial job. And it was like wage. It was, a dog couldn't live off of it. But I needed to work.
I remember my mother, when we first arrived here, she just cried for a whole week because she was chief secretary for the geological department in our city over there. And when she came here, she had to work at a sweatshop. That was her first job. And she was completely blown away. It was traumatic for her, incredibly traumatic.
Part of that oppression, either you get fortified by it, you get proud and you push forward and you say, I'll take any job and I'm going to make it. Or you get eaten up by it and you get really depressed. You wonder how some of the sisters and the brothers who come here, how they make it. How they make it in this country because it's so damn hard sometimes.
I have some fears and reservations in sharing at this level on film because you don't betray your family, you don't betray your culture. But that was outweighed by the fact that we talk about people not knowing us, but that also has to do with us not sharing about who we are.
So oversimplified the Arabs. We've been blobbed into this massive blob of terrorism and rich oil sheikhs and all the stereotypes that we have to deal with day in and day out.
Anything that's derogatory or pejorative or nasty or evil or bad is attributed to the evil, dark Arab, Muslim, Palestinian.
I get so outraged by it. There are how many millions of Arab people? We have how many countries? Each one of us represent a different ideology at the end. Even Egyptian, Iraqi, Lebanese, Palestinians. We look alike, maybe, we don't really. But how did... No, we don't.
I think about the TWA crash. I remember when that plane crashed, and the first thing I heard on the news was Arab terrorists or Iranian terrorists, Oklahoma bombing. Okay? In my face. I was so angry when that happened. Because maybe it wasn't directly saying Hania did it, but it was saying your people did it. Your people are responsible.
People automatically ask you to justify.
What do you think? What do you think? You know? And it was so frustrating because, wait a minute, you don't even know what caused this plane crash. You have no idea, and automatically you targeted us.
I have been stopped in so many airports across Europe, everywhere. We can't assign you a seat, I'm sorry. Can you come over here and open your bags? Who packed your bags? Where are you coming from? Why were you in Saudi Arabia? Why were you in Egypt?
How easy was it during 1990 and 91 for the media to say, showdown in the Gulf, these American soldiers going into our territory to get our oil. What was that about? Total dehumanization of all those Iraqi people. How many tens of thousands, some have estimated over 250,000 Iraqis were massacred during the Gulf War and were buried in the desert. I mean, I'm angry about that. A total dehumanization of Arab people. And it was okay with the average American. Hey, did you see the coverage of the war last night? It looked like a Nintendo game on TV.
It's like a Nintendo game.
Life no longer has meaning or value. It's another video game.
Lights and explosions and how love
thankfully that all our modern day technology and our weaponry.
So many people so fast.
Yeah.
You create this other. You know, you got to name it as being different and inferior. Otherwise, how on earth can you justify all these atrocities that continue to this day? Race, after all, is about controlling people.
They gave us these deeds and said, okay, here's your land. This is what they did to our elders, 2 generations elders ago. They gave us the piece of paper, said you have the deed, the land is yours, now you can borrow money on it. So then we were no longer Indians. Once you're land-based, once you don't have a reservation, you're not Indians. We are the only people who have to carry a card, a plastic card from the government that says how much Indian we are. We have to prove who we are.
If anybody ever looks at Indian law, they'd be blown away. Because we're one of the most legislated people in the United States now. We have hundreds and hundreds of laws that directly impact our lives that we have not had involvement or say or agreement with imposed upon it. Even to when I was married, they terminated my husband's tribe. So they passed, Congress got together, didn't bother to talk to anybody there, terminated the tribe, but they wanted the land. And, we still have, I believe the latest stats I've seen is 80% of the natural resources are still under our native lands. So they're really working very hard to, quote-unquote, legally exterminate us in this generation. We are the coal, we are the copper, we are the gold, we are the water, we are the uranium, we are the land herself. People don't understand that within our generations, we've had the full-on wars. We've had the tanks, we've had the dogs, we've had the guns, we've had the helicopters, we've had the small craft planes. Post-Wounded Knee was the largest massive political trials in the history of the United States. Almost 400 people were charged. People had to deal. So for a number of years, the protection of the land, the growing of crops, the teaching of the culture was put on hold while people went through courts. It was a bloody war ground. And I don't know how to even relate to people unless you have been in a war ground to even express what was going on. People would come to our home. Somebody had opened up with automatic fire. A child had been shot through the eye. So it was very violent. During that 5-year time period, over 60 Native people were killed. I no longer believe in the word justice. I won't even use it in connection with certain things. And these people that we're dealing with all the time, they look at everything as a commodity. They look at everything as buy and sell and greed, and they're out of control. And, even to have the cities that we have now, where is that coming from? The umbilical cords go to the land, and that comes from us. And our poverty is their wealth. And it hasn't changed. Not calling me?
At the point in my life of finding out that as a group of people we were brought here as slaves, and that was why I was treated so different even in school, that just really just took me out for months. I couldn't speak, I couldn't, I just alienated myself from everybody, and I just like, damn, there was a lot of confusion in my head about who I was, what I was, why I was, where I was. And that confusion was sealed in by silence. And when I found out and tried to address it, there was even more silence.
Just as an experiment, I would just try and bring up the topic of the subject of this film of racism, and nobody would even give me the time of day.
I think silence is another way of going along without saying so. But it's certainly not standing up against. And I think silence is a cop-out.
In some ways, by not bringing it up, that's how I maintain my privilege. It's not calling name to things, keeping silent, not questioning people, not
pushing people further than they're comfortable, not making people feel uncomfortable. Other white people feel uncomfortable. Men feel uncomfortable. You know, you don't do that. As a white woman around privilege, I have the privilege to work on, you know, my internalized racism or not. Like, if it gets too hard or uncomfortable or I'm too busy, I can just, like, put it on a shelf. I was feeling angry about something. I was driving down the street, and all of a sudden, this image came into my mind of me being in control of an Asian woman. And I thought, oh my God, where did that come from? Where did that come from? I was experiencing anger in myself about something totally unrelated. And I got for myself the piece about racism and about oppression that is the privilege of taking my own intolerable anger and putting it somewhere else. Why bother looking at that? It's too painful. I know I have to do this work, but I don't know. My life is so comfortable. My children have everything they need. I have everything I need. People of color serve me. Why bother? And I don't have a good answer.
Well, how are you bothering, would you say?
How am I bothering? I'm here, for one. I'm willing to say this stuff, this shit that lives in me. I bother because I care, because I want a sense of community that's real, that isn't just fake.
What does community mean? I mean, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I think a huge part of racism is this acceptance. It goes along sort of as combining the silence with, you know, we're all white, so we get it, like this inside joke kind of stuff without even saying what it is, but yeah, you get it because you're white kind of thing. I mean, that's severely racist to me in a dangerous way, because still nobody's talking about it and we're all still doing it. And I'm mad because it's just not good enough.
As a lesbian, as a woman who grew up in poverty, I can frequently find ways to distance myself from privilege. To say, well, it's not mine. You know, I don't have a responsibility for it. The men have it. The straight folks have it. The people with the money have it. Because I want to be over here with you. I don't want to be over there with you. Now, what does that mean to me? Does it mean that in order for you to be over here, you've got to, like, fire the servants, give away your money? You know, I don't even know what it means. This is a class issue for me in part, because I come from a poor family. I don't trust the people on the Hill. And so part of the way I distance myself from a racist culture that is built on economics, at least in part, is that I say I'm not really a part of it because I don't have that privilege. Well, the reality is I'm going deeply in debt, but I can get the loans to get a PhD. And it's a real funny thing. What does it mean for somebody to be authentic?
I'm really stuck on wanting to speak to the why bother, because that's totally festering within me. In the large multicultural training I've been in, I'll be in the white group and all the, students of color would be in the other room, and I can hear them chanting and singing, and they come out of there, they're all glowing and yeah, and we're just sitting there oh, guilt, shame, I don't know. I think things really open up to a whole other level, just sitting in a mixed group of white women and women of color.
I remember it early. We were good friends in high school. I sponsored her into a social club that we had in this large urban high school. And when it came time to vote, I heard ding, 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 and I realized that she was not going to be invited in. And even though I voiced my sadness and my outrage, I didn't quit that group.
A couple weeks ago, I was
waiting on a table of Asian people, I caught myself being surprised at the level of knowledge that they had of wine. And then I caught myself being angry at myself for my surprise. And I noticed my level of discomfort and for the rest of the time that I waited on them, and trying to somehow make it better, but not allow them to see that that was what I was doing. I know that it is still a reaction that I have, and one that puts me in a place of not knowing what to do.
Both sides of my family are so different. My white grandmother, everything was very doily and white lace, and my black grandmother's side was plastic on the seats, and
I just had a real distressed experience of, what are you? Are you black or are you white? Are you this or are you that?
I wanted to be white. I wanted to be so white, and I started to really straighten my hair and change the way that I spoke, and everything from my mother didn't understand that I'd never washed my own hair, that had always been done by black women. And I said to her, well, now that I'm living with you, who's going to do my hair? And she said, well, do your own hair. And I just remember just shaking and just thinking, I can't just do my own hair, and looking in the open phone book, just hoping to find under beauty products a black face or a name that would say Mr. Washington or Jackson Salon or Maurice's Style House, or just something where I'm doing whatever I need to do to get my hair done, and just realizing all the differences and having people say, oh, you're adopted. I didn't know you were adopted. And I say, no, this is my mother. This is my mother, and realizing that I could never be white. I wanted to have like this little happy Brady Bunch kind of life, because I didn't. And I came to terms with the fact that I'm never going to be white. And, like you did, I'm never going to be white. And I just need to accept that.
I never longed to be white. Matter of fact, there weren't any white people in my life that loved me, that nurtured me, that cared about me. And after a while, I became resentful that they were absent. I didn't want my mother to show up for anything. I was very ashamed. So when I was with my father is where I found comfort, and where I had family connections.
First-generation American, and it was the more you can look like, the American, lighter skin, certain features, get rid of the accent, don't learn Spanish, listen to rock and roll instead of, salsa. So everything was yanked away.
We had this group of young tenderloin kids. We were 10, 11, 12, and we're all goat people. And we so afraid that we will lose our culture, that we stay together all the time. And we don't want to assimilate.
Was that conscious though? Did you talk about it in the group?
It was our choice that we went to Chinese school, and then we always want to be like the big sister in the Chinese school. We would tell the little kid, don't you ever lose Chinese language. You have to learn who's the president of China and things like that. And then we know people that in the middle school who become ABC, which is American-born Chinese. But that's the group that we don't want to be. So it's really funny, in the cafeteria we have two sides. And it seems like we created this enemy group. And they will always speak English, and then we will make fun of them. When I went to college, I hang around Caucasian friends. Then I lost that group of people.
You're an ABC now?
No. Oh no, because I'm not born here. I came here when I was 10. even up to date, that I'm conscious and I'm aware, and APC is a label, I also feel that when I say APC as looking down on them and as like making a joke and as like, you are Chinese, but you don't know Chinese. You know, like I am bilingual, I read and write Chinese. You know, I say that term with all these feelings behind it. And they can feel it too. I mean, I meet people, I'm like, APC. And they say, God, you know, a lot of things behind that 3 letters.
So that's really helpful because now I know how you look at me. I've always wondered, see, it's always been important for me to guess what it was like to be you.
There have been times where I got away from being Asian, classifying myself as an Asian but not like them, right? I remember that growing up and just, you know, not asking my mom to wear a sari when she'd take me to school. She used to wear pants to work, but she'd wear saris when she came home or when we went out in the evening. And that was part of her assimilation, just being really tired of having everyone ask, why do you wear the red dot? What does the bindi mean? What does it mean to wear a sari? And in some ways it took away from her ability to be a good teacher. And yet it was something when she came home, she could be that whole person she was and felt most comfortable as.
I remember going for my first job interview, you know, and removing my bindi, wearing my nice tailored suit, and looking at the mirror and said, oh my God, you know, this is what my parents wanted me to be. I had to just disrobe everything I know about Sri Lankan and being Asian. And I'm still learning to unlearn what I had loaded myself with in wanting to be so prim. I was trying to live up to the model minority myth. And so of course you have 4-point, GPAs, but there's a price to pay for it. Yes, I have this great exterior shell in my life, but all it takes is one crack, and the inside is nothing.
I was so into assimilating into the American culture and learning the school system, the culture, and how to speak without the accent, and how to act politely, and how to forego the criticisms and the looks, because I didn't want to make them angry at me. I didn't want them to not like me, because I'm different, and I can't stand up for my difference. It frightens me now to think about it, because I've never actually looked back and seen how much I've changed. And I'm being very confused about who I am and who I've become. I no longer know where my roots are because it's changed so much. China, politically, socially, economically. And yet I'm here in America where a lot of people don't accept me for who I am. And the people that I have to submit to, the authority people, the police who give me tickets, the people I go to for help are white. How do I tell them my entire story of where I came from, who I am, and feel that they will accept me?
Let's take that promised break. I want you to find a partner. Go for a walk with that partner and talk about, so far as you've been looking at this video, what has most moved you? What words or images remain with you? And then in 10 minutes.
No, let's take 15 minutes. There doesn't seem to be any place here to get coffee. So where could they go if they want to get coffee or something?
To wear a sari, and in some ways it took away from her ability to be a good teacher. And yet it was something when she came home, she could be that whole person she was and felt most comfortable as.
I remember going for my first job interview, and
removing my bindi, wearing my nice tailored suit, and looking at the mirror and said, oh my God, this is what my parents wanted me to be. I have to just disrobe everything I know about Sri Lankan and being Asian. And I'm still learning to unlearn what I had loaded myself with in wanting to be so prim. I was trying to live up to the model minority myth. And so of course you have 4-point, GPAs, but there's a price to pay for it. Yes, I have this great exterior shell in my life, but all it takes is one crack, and the inside is nothing.
I was so into assimilating into the American culture and learning the school system, the culture, and how to speak without the accent, and how to act politely, and how to forego the criticisms and the looks, because I didn't want to make them angry at me. I didn't want them to not like me, because I'm different, and I can't stand up for my difference. It frightens me now to think about it, because I've never actually looked back and seen how much I've changed, and I'm being very confused about who I am and who I've become. I no longer know where my roots are because it's changed so much, China, politically, socially, economically. And yet I'm here in America where a lot of people don't accept me for who I am. And the people that I have to submit to, the authority people, the police who give me tickets, the people I go to for help are white. How do I tell them my entire story of where I came from, who I am, and feel that they will accept me? I've only been in America for just over 2 years, and so I find it fairly safe to say that I'm Indian. What I find the most difficult is going back to India, or being judged by Indians as not being Indian enough. It's scarier sort of to go home and to find out that you don't really belong, or you're not accepted there.
Or what I'll get a lot, gosh, you're so Indian, we're not even like this in India. Why do you And that's sometimes really hard to deal with.
For me, the whole question of, what is really Indian, or in my case, what is really Indonesian, and, leaving one's country, for me, I never left because I was never there, and so my reference point for what is Indonesian has been growing up, my parents. And, when we're in Indonesia and people can't understand us because they speak Indonesian of 25 years ago, then I realized, they're not Indonesian either. Now what do I do? Then I think, oh dear, the last 3 decades, what have I been mimicking, or trying to, emulate? And then what, of course, have I chosen not to emulate, and how does this figure into it? And the truth is that I will never feel comfortable there. I will never feel entirely accepted there, and nor will I hear it. And that is why I've always asked the question of, who can I find who is most like me?
Father loved me, but they didn't mirror me. There wasn't any reflection. I kind of needed some reflection. I almost feel like I'm grieving for all that time of feeling so alone and really not being able to relate to anybody. Nobody really. And always feeling like I was not quite right, just wasn't quite ready.
I really felt, really ashamed growing up, and I think what really changed that is my mom introducing me to a Filipino community that was like on the other side of town, not where we lived. We'd drive 45 minutes. to be around brown people. And I always felt that my mother was that bridge for me, that she would say, this is my daughter Lisa, and then be like, oh, okay, she must be brown, she must be Filipino, she's down, da-da-da. But when I went to college and didn't have that mom to show me to the community, I was lost. I was very lost. I went to a lot of the Filipino clubs, and they were like, the Latin group's down the hall, you know, the black group's over there. And I'm like, but no, I'm you guys. I'm here. This is my people. And they would not accept me. And I think in college, the group that did accept me was the African American community. And that is where I felt the most love and felt the most accepted.
The white folks next door were really pissed off that they had these Japanese people moving in next to them. But the kids at Japanese school, where we had to go every Saturday, would fight with us every recess because we were half-breeds. They didn't like white people. So here I am with both sides of my family, none of them liking us. And very quickly, I think each of us sort of created some identity that wasn't Asian or white. And to college, when I tried to join the Asian Students Union, and I couldn't get in because I wasn't Asian enough, so I ended up with the Filipinos and the East Indians. No, I didn't get into the Asian Students Union because you had to be Japanese or Chinese or Asians. And they argued with me and said, you are not Asian because your father is not Asian, and your father has to be Asian for you to be Asian. What do you mean? I'm not, you know, I eat with chopsticks. You know, what kind of test do I have to pass? So meanwhile, my Chicano friends are all going, mira, I'm not a, you know, what are you, a sellout or something because you're not joining Mecha? And I kept saying, I'm not Mexican, but no, you know, people wouldn't believe me. And so basically, I became an honorary Mexican. When I met my first husband, who was Puerto Rican, it was like a window opened up because once I married him and became Santiago, instead of Roberts, nobody asked any questions anymore. Nobody ever asked what I was anymore. And all of a sudden I started getting all these assignments. I'm a journalist to write about the Mission District. It's like, oh, let's get her. She's Mexican. She knows what they're talking about. So, you know, it's kind of, so it's like your race becomes your face. And whatever my face was, and I remember staring in the mirror as a child going, well, what do I look like? Who am I? I still don't have a sense of what I look like. I have become a Latina, basically.
For people who are monoracial, they're dealing with it outside. But when you're biracial, the power struggle within of how do you come to terms with the way things are socially structured and how we've been socialized into these roles or forced into these places where we don't want to be, it's not comfortable for us. And here, you know, I grew up in a time where I had to choose. There wasn't an option. It wasn't like I'm mixed. Like Isabel says, you know, I'm mixed and I'm proud.
I remember filling out the application for urban, and they said, you know, race check 1, and I was like, I can't check 1, you know, and I've always checked other, and it was like, I'm an other now. I don't have a name. I'm an other.
You know, actually there was a law, the law of hypodescent in the 1600s, and the law said that if you had 1 drop of black blood, you were black. And so there is a historical precedent that formed this ideology that people still live by. And so just so that you know that where that came from, and it was based on economics. It is a shifting paradigm for people to think differently about not having to choose one or the other.
I'm glad you brought that up because I also think it's a hard thing to let go of. I'll say, well, I'm half white, but I identify as African American, and part of that has to be with my sense of almost political alignment with being African American, because when I look at myself and society looks at me, I'm black. It doesn't. No one looks at me and says, oh, that's her mother's white. You know, I said I can't be anything but black.
There is some privilege that is provided by being unidentifiable.
What is it? What is
Get to be whatever you want to be.
I don't know that you get to be whatever you want to be because there's still the cultural things coming from behind you of what you are and the societal things coming at you from the front of of what you're allowed to be?
My experience is definitely I get to be what I want to be, because if I say I'm Arab and of color, it's just really so irrelevant, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think in those terms. So when people really address that issue, to me, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll play a game for a while, but in the end, I know what I'm doing. But I don't feel pressed, because actually people like my color, they like my hair. I'm a good person. I'm a good human being. And it really doesn't matter to them if I'm green, purple, or red. I don't have a total carefree life, but the doors are not closed in my face because I have the color of skin that I do. You know, that's what I want to also speak to. It's not, there is light in the shadow. That we're talking also about the light in the shadow, not just the shadow. Yes. And I want to address the light because I'm living in the light. That's what I'm saying. And it's like I see the issue and I see the problem, and I also see the solutions, and I see the hope, and I see the light. And I want to talk about the light, goddammit.
I think the life that you're speaking of isn't a non-racist life. It's a life where you're passing as the more dominant culture. I think a lot of that is why we're grouped in to the white category, because we can pass.
I understand you say not a lot of doors have been closed in your face. It's not about doors being closed in my face either. It's about having to walk into an institution and having to explain why I do the things I do. It's having to walk through a campus and having to explain why I look the way, dress the way, talk the way I do. That's what it's about. It's having to explain why I do what I do, why my family is the way that it is. That's the type of racism I'm talking about. That's where I'm different. That's where I am not white. I am colored. I am other.
There is an individual experience, and then there is also a cultural or a group experience. A man as dark as the man to whom I'm married may, on a personal level, you know, if he's not got his eyes open, looking around him, say, my life is free of this stuff. I'm moving freely in the world because my white friends and my other friends love me, and I'm getting on very well. But if he moves outside of that context, that kind of cocoon of friends, the reality is pretty brutal, you know, and on an ongoing basis, I will act as a spy, you know, I will go down and he will go down, the car is not accepted for air conditioning repair, I will go down, it will be taken in the same day. He will go down to do a bank transaction, someone will stop him, I will go down, the transaction will be carried out, and obviously then we have to take action in order to protest that, and it becomes a way in which you live in the world, that these things on a cultural and social level become part of your very life. I told you all the story about up until 10 or 15 years ago when people would say, you know, Penny, you don't look Jewish, and I'd say thank you. I mean, the fact that it's only been recently that I remembered that story. I was raised as white, and as white is central, and Jewish was a part of that. I grew up not only celebrating Passover and Hanukkah, but celebrating Christmas and Easter, because my folks, who had very strong Jewish identities, wanted me to be an American. They wanted me to fit in. I feel it almost on the exact opposite of how you feel it. It's like I didn't feel deprived of my culture. Even though I'm Ashkenazi, I didn't feel that. And I grew up with a lot of Jewishness. And I wasn't taught to be an American. My parents didn't want us to fit in. They wanted us to retain our culture. And I don't have the association with whiteness that you do. When I was growing up, you know, it was the Lower East Side. There were all these Orthodox Jewish men, and they'd be on the street and dancing and singing and Simchat Torah, and they'd have the Torah rolling out through the street, and they'd, you know, and my father would go down to get bagel, you know, and like 3 or 4 hours later, he'd come back home, you know, and it was just like he had talked to every single person on the street. And there was just love. We did folk dancing on Wednesday night and square dancing on Friday night, and there was just this. It was rich. You know, it was rich. I just long for that. It's easy to say now, But I feel like I would trade all the fucking privilege for that sense of belonging and that sense of connection. So I'm just really looking at what part of my voice have I been holding back, or how do I reclaim that? And just when you were just saying that, I just felt this terror, like, oh my God. It's like, I can feel myself shaking when I think about my assimilation and think about like my New York Jewish relatives, and it was like this disgust. That was the anti-Semitism. That was the internalized stuff. And I said it felt like worms crawling inside my body. How did those worms get in there? Like, they gotta get them out. So I'm like afraid. What's in me? So it's just like, oh my God, what would it mean if I really, dealt with all those worms?
The worms are the way I've been taught to hate myself and hate the bad Jews. The ways that we've tried to survive haven't always looked beautiful. And that isn't just true about Jews, that's true about every people. That, the cost of oppression has made people survive in ways that don't always look so good. There are lots of Jews who don't look so good, who think they have to survive by having one more mink coat or one more, West Bank. We have been taught to feel disgusted about ourselves, and it's not your fault, Penny, that you ever were made to feel that.
I thought I was the only one that felt it. I thought it was me. You're in the right.
I can remember the school that I went to, and it was predominantly white. There was a few black kids that went there, but there was no teachers that were black, so I had no role models. And I also can remember when you raise your hand and you were never called upon.
Actually, I was in the 3rd grade when I first went to boarding school, but they said that I probably didn't get a good education in the public school system, so they put me back to the 1st grade. And so I was like 15 when I graduated from the 8th grade. Of course, all that time I was being a good little Indian person, like what I thought they wanted me to be. And they were really mainstreaming me or conforming me to what they wanted me to be, the system. And they said, go out there and become acculturated, go to the ballet, go to the this and that, and opera. So I did.
Like I mentioned before, if our little round brown children don't fit to those square white holes by the time they're in 4th grade, then they're all of a sudden they have learning disabilities. We have a school in our area that's fondly called the Indian School, because that's where all the Indian kids get sent, probably starting in the 5th grade. They get sent there. And that is because they won't conform. That's what oppression is trying to do to us, to make us conform.
The one that stands out for me of being ashamed of who I was being a freshman in high school. And one rainy day, I remember being in this little tight office, trying to make a phone call home, all kinds of kids in there, all kinds of teachers, everybody jamming to get to school, and I have to call home for some reason, I don't know why, and my tita, my grandmother, answers the phone. And I'm struck by the fact that I don't want anyone to hear me speak Spanish. I mean, this is my grandmother. I spoke to her in English. How old was I then? Maybe, 13, something like that. Being so ashamed of what? Of knowing 2 languages?
The girls have been going to more predominantly white schools,
And the choices are very limited for them there, I think, because even if they, being brought up more open to all cultures, that doesn't mean that the white culture is open to them. Is that your experience?
Yes. I have to prove to them first that I'm intelligent. I have to prove to them first that, I'm not just some stupid little, woman or just some Mexican or a gangster first. Because I remember that in like my 7th grade year. That's when I was like wearing baggy clothes. And I remember the way my teacher looked at me like, oh no, a troublemaker. I remember it so distinctly. And I saw the way he looked at me and I was just like, and then it was like, he didn't know I got straight A's. He didn't know that, drug-free. He didn't know anything, but he assumed that I was going to be the troublemaker in his class. And
remember that assignment you had at Madeline?
yeah, I had to dress up as a celebrity, and we looked through magazines, but I couldn't find no one that was Latina, Chicana, Mexicana, and I wanted to be a model, but there was no models. They were all white. And then I wanted to be an actor, but they were all white. And I ended up crying, and I stressed over it, just a little project, for fun. It was Spirit Week. And I couldn't find something, and that's when I felt bad. I hated myself for who I was, because I wasn't white and I wasn't like the people in the math scheme.
We want to accept our cultura. We want to accept the power that we have, the beauty of being African, of being Cubana, of being bilingual, of being beautiful. We want to accept that power, and yet we have these images or lack of images around us. And the only images around us are those that deny who we are.
One of the things that always used to make me feel oppressed was, there's this standard of beauty which even people who are designated as white are in some sense supposed to match up to. And if you don't, and in England, believe me, that it's much more homogeneous. And if you are endowed with any different type of feature, automatically that will gain ridicule.
When we don't look like that standard of beauty, what happens to us? My mom gave me the complex about my nose, and it was reinforced by all of society, so she didn't need to say much. So when I was 6 years old, I said, Mommy, am I pretty? And she said, no, because I'm not blonde, I don't have blue eyes, and I don't have a ski-slip nose, and especially my nose bugged the shit out of me, because do you know how much shit is out there about the Jewish nose? How much, mockery? And I was thinking, I started touching my nose recently and saying, you poor thing, you're just sitting here to help me breathe. And all this hatred is on you,
This lady was supposed to be my elder, who I have entrusted with the care of my child, can look at me and say, well, I think rocks are I think they're dirty, stinky, and, she looked at me and told me that. And this was my elder.
That's fine.
Oh, we had to go in the next room and have a talk. Oh, we yelled and screamed, and I know people were standing at the door. We were in there for an hour, but when we came out, she had my respect and I had hers, and we had a totally different rapport.
It's total disrespect for
your choice.
Yeah.
For what you choose.
And I experienced that. I wore locks for 8 or 9 years, and my mom, everybody in my family just laughed at me and talked about me and put me down, and it was an area of unbelief how someone could just hate you because of your hair.
But that comes from a devaluation of the texture of our hair, and that goes back to slavery. And not being able to comb your hair. Or your folks pinching your nose so you would look, as European as possible, so you wouldn't look so African.
Black women are seen as either mammies or Jezebel.
And how I have had a tendency to mythologize people of color.
We as biracial people are viewed, especially women, as exotic. It's okay to be exotic and different.
Mountain woman, connected to the earth, and so I want what she's got.
I'm just a woman.
You're exotic, you're easy, you're sexy, you're kinky, you're,
I'm getting angry right now because when they make me into a goddess, damn it, I don't have feelings. I can't be the person that sits, looks at that camera right now and has feelings about stuff that's happened to me in my life because I'm a goddess. I'm big. I'm an Amazon. I'm exotic. And it's not, it marginalizes me. It takes the humanness out of me. I am a damn human being.
The people that we were most dependent on taught us to hate the color of our skin, to be ashamed of how we looked.
When I was born, my mother, said this can't be my child because I was, as you can imagine, quite, dark and hairy. She used to tell this as sort of, something funny. And the way she decided to survive Jewish oppression was basically to say that I'm not Jewish, she said, but my children are Jewish. The whole question of being dark, and having a dark child was very dangerous. She felt it was a threat to her survival.
All my life, I was brought up to look as much like a white woman as possible. You straighten your hair, you stay light. I think I shared with all of you about my grandmother making me wear the hats. These big hats, because Lord help us, I should get any darker if I was out in the sun.
When I come in with a tan or come back from a vacation or something, she always says to her friends, she really is the lightest one. Doesn't normally look like this,
Lighter is better. So in African American culture, I've been lifted up. I've been special. I've been, I've got good hair. I have light skin. I have all of those attributes. And sometimes it makes me sick.
I'm the only one in the group that addresses as Afro-Cuban, and I guess it is very painful for me. I look at all your faces and I see the love and the support that you have, but that's not always what I gotten from my Latino friends because they see me as black first. It was the Latino close friends and best friends who told me you can't dance in my 15 because your partner is too dark. You can come because you're lighter. It's the same Latino community that, got me ready to go to face the world, already knowing that I was different and I wasn't always going to be accepted.
It isn't easy because we get those messages of, blacks, you don't go out with a black. My best friend in high school was a black transvestite. And we had the best times together. But you think I would ever tell my family who I was hanging with? No way. And yet, when they did find out that we were walking home from school together, as soon as I walked in the door, I got battered physically and verbally. My brother was ready to leave the house. My father went into a whole tirade of stories about the black men he worked with and how they treated women. And I thought to myself, I can't believe what I'm hearing in this house. How can you claim to be Christian and talk this way? How can you, have somebody my color and talk this way? You're a dark person. How can you talk that way? I couldn't understand it. It was beyond me.
My black sisters are my sisters just as much as my Latino sisters are. And I experienced a lot of pain with not being able to openly express that at home. Not being able to feel like they would be fully accepted in the way my love for them would not be fully accepted. Even though I know that my parents would never, ever in their life say they're not welcome here, because my friends always were, but again, there's that underlying feeling of, well, they're different.
They're not the
Yeah.
If I say I'm Iraqi, let's get close to my question. There are light Iraqis, there are dark Iraqis. If I say I'm a Jew, you're white. The same skin.
My daughter, who's 15, I just learned this like a month ago from her, that when she goes into a store, usually she's followed around because people suspect she's going to steal something. And she said it as matter-of-factly as anything else. And I said, what? Why didn't you tell me? She said, well, to her, that's as normal as it never happening to me is normal. We all live in the same house and we all walk out the same door and they go to a whole different world and I hardly ever think about that. And there's only so close I can get to that.
I have a white half-sister who's older than me.
She has no clue as to how her own siblings live. My youngest child is fairly dark. My sister's child is blonde-haired and blue eyes. She is able to adapt much more in a white world and feels comfortable there, and she can hang. And yet we have the same parents, similar genetics, everything. But just because of all of these colored values, we will never have the same experiences in life.
Danny, how did you feel being raised in the South, having to go to colored bathrooms or go in through did you experience stuff like that?
Well, during that time, everything to its time, but I didn't feel bad because that's where it was. I couldn't change it, so I accepted it. Till it got better.
And you felt bad about it, but you just accepted it as it...
Well, I had to. What could I do? Same thing has changed, and I'm grateful for it. I've seen the good, I've seen something bad. I don't have no hard feeling at all. The same God brought me will carry me right now.
It was very common to go from house to house and be able to see this big picture of God being white.
They lynched us under the name of the Bible.
Exactly.
Okay, so they enslaved us under the interpretation of their Bible.
Exactly.
Okay.
Slavery was sanctioned by the Vatican, and anybody can justify their right to kill if they say, I'm doing this in the name of God.
How many of us are aware of the brown bag rule that was prevalent in a lot of the churches in the South? The brown bag rule is if there was a brown bag hanging by some of the doors of churches, if you tried to go into that church and you were darker than that brown bag, you could not get in. And there was also a comb that was hanging by some of the churches. If you pick up the comb and it couldn't go through your hair, you could not go into that church. So that's oppressive stuff. Some churches have perpetuated that type of thing.
That spiritual structure, why do we use religion to perpetuate those kinds of things? Why would you bring that into a house of God? My sister had started going to a church, and she said, you really have to come to church, because the whole family, we're all going to church for Easter, and we're going to go have fun. And I was like, I don't want to go to church, and I don't want to go to church because I know that there's going to be some homophobic feelings in there. I don't want to deal with it. And I totally own up to the fact that I anticipated that, and I put that out there without knowing what was going to happen. I was defiant about that. I was defensive about that happening. And my sister said, oh, please, come on. This is, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. So I was like, you know what? That's true. I don't know anything's going to happen. Get to church, preacher starts talking about gay folks. Starts talking about, fag this and, be a real man that and that manly women this. And everybody in the church started laughing, including my family. And when I mentioned it later at brunch to my family, they said, oh, please, Debbie. They weren't talking about, you should be used to that by now. That should be okay now. As a heterosexual, I carry a lot of stuff. I have a picture of my sister there on this table. I lost my sister. And I lost my sister because she had a relationship with another woman, and it was like I couldn't even stand to undress in front of my sister thinking that there was something she was going to do to me. This is my sister. This was my sister. But I had no way, being socialized in this world, I had no way to relate to my sister who had a relationship with another woman. Do you understand? There's something really sick about that. Really, there's something really sick about that. I can relate to all these women who have relationships with men, but I can't relate to my sister because she had a relationship with a woman, and I'm a woman too.
The thing that has always astounded me is that we can judge gay and lesbian people and in so doing oppress them in the same way that we have been oppressed.
It's this taste in my mouth for oppression, for making someone feel like they're not a part of the planet just because of what's in your head.
first boy that I ever kissed was a black boy. And I remember I was so excited to go home and tell my mom that I kissed this boy. I absolutely adored him, you know. And my mom was very accepting of it, but at the same time I could hear her apologizing for it when she would speak about it to other people. You know, well, he's a really nice young man and he plays basketball. And, you know, even though my mom was trying to get away from that whole way of thinking and looking at things, I don't think she could help it. It was unconscious.
It was Fleet Week, 1967, and this white sailor came up and said, "Hey, pretty white girl, too bad she's with a nigger." And he had 2 ice creams in his hand, and the sailor said, "Well, I mean it. If you need me, I'm over there." And my boyfriend at the time said, "You're not getting over there." And the ice creams flew, and a fight. And then we heard the police sirens. And I stood there with this invisible veil of symbolic and cultural protection and said, "Stand your ground. You did nothing wrong." At which point he said, "Whoa, do you have a lot to learn about the way things are."
If I marry a Vietnamese man, I can be kicked out of the family. I remember at my prom, I wanted to go to the prom with a Vietnamese man, and my brother said, "I would rather you go with a black man." And, you know, and then I ended up to go to the prom with my brother.
But that's deep. So it's like the joke I told about my husband being named Soon He, and how the black people I would introduce him to, they would go, "Say it again," and they couldn't say it, and I just say, "Oh, come on, Negro, we got names Shaniqua, Shanaqua, and you can't say Soon He." It's because you can't look at a Korean person and adjust so that his name sounds bizarre. They stop listening. Yeah, and I go, "You stop looking, you stop listening." You know, I've confronted the black folks that I'm connected to, and I think, you can't say my husband's name. What is the problem? You know, I realize him being Korean is the problem. Being with someone for over 2 years now who's Chinese, you know, someone in my family saying, "Well, does he even look Latino? You know, does he even sound Latino? You know, help us out here, Maya." You know, so still that ongoing thing. You know, and although I know they don't mean to hurt me, it hurts me. You know, it hurts me to hear things like that.
Any woman I've been close to, been lovers with, have been Ashkenazi. Part of that is I can't find any Sephardic. But also, I never feel incestuous to me. I don't really even want to date a Sephardic woman. Now, is that not fucked up? Of course it's fucked up. I don't want to date a Sephardic woman. I'm attracted to Ashkenazi women, and what does that say then? I mean, all this pride I have about being a Sephardic woman, but at night, when things are quiet, I don't want somebody making me burekas. I want somebody making me matzo ball soup. Most of those Ashkenazi women have also been middle to upper middle class. So I don't know what it is or where it comes from, but certainly it's some kind of oppression that I've internalized. I think this country has so much wrong with it, but I'm very grateful to it, because I don't know what I would do as a Sephardic lesbian in Turkey. But I suspect I would not have a happy life.
I'm talking to my nephew, and he's 24, 25 years old, and he's telling me all the stories about his girlfriend, and I feel like we're really bonding. Then he says something that lets me know that all these women were white. And my heart broke. It was like I was totally rejected. And then the other part of me was like, be rational about this. You know, he has his choice. Let's be more evolved in the way you look at this. He just likes them better. And what comes up is no. I've got to try to have straight hair and to have that body that's all skinny and straight or whatever and doesn't get out of control, you know, and once you've done all that, then the man that you've done all that for turns and chooses a white woman. the real thing, or what, and this is where the pain, there's been a lot of pain for me. A lot of pain for me.
My experience is on the other side of your nephews, because for 10 years I was married to a white man. And you guys didn't know that when I was doing all this stuff. And it takes a the seat. Yeah, it's hard for me to say that one. And it took me a long time, and I still get tearful. I mean, I guess the relationship ended maybe about 3 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago. And it ended when I woke up and I realized that I'm with this white man because I want privilege. The white man has a certain amount of privilege, and he can open this door for me, and I can get this privilege with that. But I was with him for 10 years, and it took me 10 years to realize that he gave up that privilege when he decided to be with me, basically. I'm a big woman, having a big body, big feet, big lips, all this stuff. It all became okay when the white man validated it. And when I realized that I was getting this validation from this white person, and that I was ignoring anything that was coming from brothers, that was another piece I had to look at. That's when I started looking at and dealing with internalized racism.
There was a white man that I was dating, and he actually goes, I love you so much, but God, he goes, because our children, they wouldn't look like me. I said, are you crazy? They would look like you. And then I looked at him and I said, oh, I get it. They might be brown. And I said, you're so invested in your whiteness. White skin is something so important that you wouldn't be able to recognize in your own children that they are you and that they look like you. And
I don't know, it's so common to hear people say, I don't see color. But it's just the opposite of that. That's all they see is color.
There has to be a leap in consciousness, I think, on white people's parts to go, you know what, I can connect physically with a person of color and see myself in them, and really see myself in them, not just like go, oh yeah, well, we're just the same, we're just, and I go, no, you don't really think we're the same, because you can't see yourself in me, you just can't.
I've gone through my life, my 50 years of reacting to white people, and that's very oppressive, and that's very marginalizing, and that's all that stuff. And so my recovery now is how can I walk through this world, not in reaction to them, but walk into this world because I've developed my own set, my own community, and I'm proud about all that I am. I think when we look into our personal stories, I think that's when the chains are broken of this stuff, when we start doing the mending or the healing from inside.
I've gone through a process of not feeling the pain, of shutting myself off, of turning the other cheek, of ignoring things. It's like you just have to hold it. You want to just scream because it hurts so bad and you know what's coming.
The power struggle within. What does it cost when you don't have a voice to your survival? To not be killed, sealed in by silence.
Created a world so it's so damn hard sometimes.
When I get really upset and angry, this is what happens. I get a nosebleed. So how do we deal with that pain?
For a while, all that kept me alive was my rage. That was my survival, was my rage.
I get so outraged by it.
You continue being shut down and shut down and shut down.
Swallow it, stuff it, swallow it, stuff it.
Sometimes I don't even have a voice. Sometimes I don't even know who the hell I am. And why are you always so angry? And am I going to be able to get to the point where I'm going to be able to scream and just, just be me and let it all out there?
¿Quieres soltar el grito? Do you want to let it come out?
I so much want to find something to do.
But what you can do is, how do you live your way of life? How do you treat people around you? Do you walk your talk?
It really helped my healing is for Anna and my therapist, who happened to be Ashkenazi man, blue-eyed, blonde person who took full responsibility and told me the truth. And he didn't say, oh, it's your imagination. But it was important for me to hear. Yes, you know, we looked down at you, we thought you were shit, whatever. But now, you know, we see you and we're here.
There is a choice I can make now for the privileges I have, about the resources that I have, whatever they are. It's how I choose to use each one of them each day to untangle those interlocking, thick, yucky webs of racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, all those interlocking, systemic, institutionalized oppressive forces. Is choice by meticulous choice.
For me, it's been about going into the belly of the whale, and it's not about, you know, this like New Age transcendence thing where you sort of fly above it and put what I call metaphysical band-aids on things. For me, it's been about swimming through the slog, you know, and then it becomes for me about soul reclamation. And I want to continue to ask to be willing to be the bad example, to look real, not good.
My path is really about compassion, about opening the heart, about taking risks, telling the truth, and showing by example. And being really gentle on ourselves and others.
I want to be real conscious about the perpetuation sometimes of tradition and what people talk about when they talk about family values sometimes, because some of that stuff is very oppressive, it's very patriarchal, it's very capitalistic, you know, it's very homophobic. That stuff needs to be dismantled and critiqued.
And we see all this stuff that's affecting us as such rigid, you know, it can't change, it's monolithic, it's oppressive, and so on. But we make this stuff. It's not static. We can change it. We can resist and we can confront. It's up to us. Warrior women, multiply.
I am a product of what you are all saying, and it's working. I think I am speaking for the youth in saying that there's this feeling that we are progressing. I'm always going to experience the oppression, but I will not allow it to tear me down. I will not allow it. And whether it comes from a place of rage or whether it comes from a place of hope, it's going to happen for me, and it's going to happen for my children.
Those that play it?
The Way Back Home.
The Way Home. That little one singing. Which one?
So I don't know if they have a website or...
I'm sure. Yes, there's a website, or there used to be a website. They should have a website.
Okay.
How long are you going to need the microphone? It's almost
Okay, I'm not going to structure this discussion. I'm just going to invite your responses. Reactions, responses.
Well, being part of that group of privileged people by skin, one thing I found out very late in life is just how much Native American was in my family and how much it had been pushed aside. And one of the other parts was that the white part of my family comes from all over Northern Europe. And I don't have a sense of culture of any of that because it's all, but that's okay. In essence, people didn't see that as a problem. So I didn't see through the eyes of those who are really torn by diametric culture and what an identity crisis that is for them. And that's probably one of the strongest feelings I came away with from watching this is that, wow, this really is part of finding who you are.
Thank you. Any other observations or comments?
Because, I'm going to say this, on top of everything else that those women talked about, they were also women. And they lived in a misogynistic atmosphere also. I thought that was interesting, that they've suffered everything that the males would have suffered, but more so.
Thank you. Usually when I show this video to my students, they say to me, don't ask me to say anything for the next 10 or 15 minutes. I want to absorb, I want to process. I want to just internalize everything I've heard.
If I turn this off, will I? Is that okay?
Of course, let the fan run till it cools automatically.
I'm just trying to cut down the noise.
I know, but it might do damage.
You know, one of the things that I was going to say before is that sometimes when I show this video...
we need the microphone.
Oh, that's right.
Sometimes when I show this video to my students, I had an experience last year of showing this in Sunnyside. And for anyone who doesn't know, Sunnyside is kind of near Yakima, sort of a rural area. And it tended to be a very white group. There were some Mexican-American students in the classes, were graduate students. And I'll never forget this. I had this video go on for maybe 5 minutes. And this woman said to me, how much longer are we going to have to watch this? And I said, well, this is probably going to be on, for, it's a 90-minute video. It's a fairly long video. And her attitude was very much, why don't they just get over it? What's wrong with that? And it was, the thing that was so interesting about it is that there were these, the majority, of course, were dominant culture, Caucasian students from a farming agricultural area. And then there were some Mexican American students in the class. And this one woman who worked in the schools as a teacher, just really wonderful, worked with a lot of the migrant kids, said, this is my experience every single day. And so I think especially the first time you're looking at some of these issues of white privilege, I didn't get it at first. I didn't understand that. If I walk into a store, or if I walk into a store with Pamela, I may well be treated better than Pamela is treated. And we had an interesting experience when we were in Calgary. I teach for Gonzaga, and we had, I have a lot of cohort teaching that I do up there. And so this was several years ago, and I went up to Calgary. Pamela's doing my the whole time. And as soon as I came, the host or hostess came up and said, can I see you? And of course, I didn't know this because I was off in the bathroom and I'd been teaching for the whole weekend, and I don't always notice things after I do these long stretches of teaching. And today, I know this day. And we would both have said something. I certainly would. I didn't say anything at the time. I think I didn't realize what the experience was for Pamela until we started to talk about this. You say something.
And today I wouldn't stay either. I stayed at the time justifying it. Well, Jerry is hungry, it's late, it was like about 10:30. There weren't many other places downtown Calgary open. I can deal with this. I won't come back, but I can deal with this. Yeah, but it was interesting to stand there and to see them zipping by me and nobody stopping to say, can I help you? And I just stood there going, this is interesting. I wonder when somebody will realize I'm standing here. And at that point, Jerry came out and I proceeded to observe what happened after that. And then as we were seated, we talked about it.
But I think there's often, from a dominant culture, Caucasian perspective, sometimes guilt that goes along with looking at the issue of white privilege, looking at the lived experiences of other people. And it's kind of like, we don't get it. And I think the privilege part of it is that a lot of times we don't have to get it. So that's why it's so important to take a look at these issues, to talk to our friends, to be enriched by having experiences of knowing people who have different cultural experiences than we do.
And sometimes when people view this video or the video of Color of Fear, there are a lot of emotions that come up. People have told me that they feel guilt, they feel blame, they feel shame, and they feel responsible for the stuff that people are talking about, either in this or Color of Fear. And I say, I don't want you to feel that. And if you do have those feelings, and they're very normal and valid responses, leave them, put them aside. Say, I'm not going there, because none of us is responsible for the actions of our ancestors. What we're responsible for are the things we do from here on. Our day-to-day work and our day-to-day actions from today onwards are what we're responsible for. So if any of you are feeling those residual feelings of guilt, please don't stay there. Don't stay there. This is not what the film is about. And I want to ask you a question, because it may be easier to respond to this question. How will you do your work differently as a result of seeing this video? Whatever your work is, whether it's teaching, counseling, whether it's manager of a sales group, whatever it might be. How will you do that differently? Even your work as a reporter or as a photographer. Let me bring you the mic.
I'm not going to answer that question yet, but I did want to comment about what I thought of during watching the video. I have a little boy who's 9 years old, and he's half Mexican. And a lot of times when I was watching this, I was thinking about how am I doing my job as a mother with him? Because a lot of times in their discussions, they talked about the comments from their mothers and how that affected their lives. During our break, instead of walking with someone, I called my husband. He is not the father of my son, but was talking to him about Jesse. And I was concerned that maybe I was putting prejudice on my son not knowing, being it very subtle. So I was kind of checking, basing him about that. Something as simple as saying, because Jesse doesn't like tacos. You know, what do you mean you don't like tacos? You know, you're supposed to like tacos. You know, and so I think I've made mistakes, and I think that going through this has made me kind of reflect back on what they were and what I want to do different. I think, so when I was talking to my husband, he said, well, I don't think you need to worry about Jesse. You know, one of the questions I asked him was, do you think that he's more, who's he more ashamed of, his white mother or his Mexican father? And he's like, what are you talking about? He's not ashamed of either one of you, you know. And he's proud of all of who he is. And I'm worrying about, well, what's society going to do to him as he grows older? You know, that's wonderful that he can rise above all that now. But how am I going to protect him from that the older that he gets? Because I've heard stories from his birth father about the treatment they got from the police and things like that. And so anyway, I just took that time to kind of check on myself what I'm going to be doing. Also, there was a comment made from a colleague of mine that I work with when I have 3 boys, 2 are white, if I say it right correctly, and then there's Jesse, and and I brought in pictures, and there was a comment from a woman, and she pointed to the picture of Jesse, and she said, oh, I bet he's just a hellraiser, instead of my other 2 boys, you know. And at that time, I didn't think of anything. Actually, he is sweeter than the other 2. He's the opposite of that. And it wasn't until I was watching this that I remembered her statement. And now that I look in hindsight, I have been kind of picking up on other things that she's been doing with children, her comments, and just even tone of voice and things like that. And so I feel a lot of responsibility. I think because I'm a teacher, I tend to do that, and a mother, so I just wanted to say.
Thank you. I appreciate your sharing that very much. And I think the best that we can do for our kids, when the kids are biracial or multiracial, and I have 2 biracial boys, is to help them to be strong, help them to know who they are, be proud of who they are, and to be strong, and to be able to respond to the society in which we live.
I just wanted to comment on what you said about your son and his father, and obviously you're in another marriage now, and it sounded like it's pretty important to these ladies that do come from 2 different backgrounds that they stay in contact with family on both sides. And it's so sad because I think even with divorce in general, it's difficult, and then when you've got the multiracial side of it as well, it's probably very difficult to stay connected, and it's more work to do that, but it's obviously really important to children to know both sides.
The father of my son, I've never married him, and his family is very strong Mexican family. Jesse's grandmother is Spokane. They live in the valley, and I live on the north side in Spokane, and our relationship didn't work out. And I don't remember a time he ever had a car with a driver's license, and I encouraged the relationship by taking not only know his family, but be proud of his family. There was a lot of conflict too, you know. I was odd person out here. I didn't make a go of it. And Hispanic families tend to be very strong. They stick together. I wanted them to have part of that and learn from that and be part of that, even though I am not.
Thank you. And as you heard from the video, what tends to happen with kids that are biracial is that they usually want to identify with the group that seems to have the most privilege. They usually want to identify with who they perceive to have the most privilege. Usually that's the white parent. But I again think if we teach them to be strong and proud of everything in their heritage, then that gives them tools to fall back on.
I was just going to say that last year we put on some workshops for teachers on understanding the Indian students, and it was in conjunction with the opening of the Museum of Art and Culture. And in fact, some of the students that came over and were part of the panel, Marie is doing her research on these students called the Rose Creek Singers from Plummer, Idaho, and Brad is their teacher. And Diane, right? And the girls have made a commitment, the high school girls have made a commitment to not use drugs and alcohol, and instead they drum and sing, and they're quite amazing. And when they were part of the panel at the museum last year on Indian education, we asked them what were some things that they wanted their teachers to know. And it was so interesting to see. They said things as simple as, we just want them to know that we're not stupid. You know, and I think there's so many stereotypes that so many people carry. And it's really not all teachers or all, you know, all of any group. But I think that it brings us to how important it is to hear the stories of people's lived experiences. And as Pamela said, it's almost like we were able to be a fly on the wall, because these are stories that we might not ever hear face to face if we're not the same cultural group.
And that reminds me that the phrase or the sentence that stays with me from this video is the statement that young Chinese girl said about, how do I tell them my entire story, who I am, where I'm coming from, and how do I know that they'll accept me? I think that is so powerful. And I think that's what each and every one of us is looking for, regardless of our ethno-racial or ethno-cultural background. We're looking for acceptance.
I grew up in the whitest of white America, a little town in western Kansas. I didn't know black people, but I didn't know many things. And when I went to college, I had a very negative, terrible experience that was with several black basketball players on scholarship to KU. And it took me years to come by that. What I did with the rest of my life, though, I traveled the world. I was a flight service manager for TWA, and I was immersed in many other cultures around the world, and I was the minority. I was the person who didn't speak the language. I was the person that you could see 12 blocks away, because at that time, before I had cancer, I was blonde. And I had blonde hair clear down to my shoulder blades, and I am very tall. And you can imagine what I looked like in Asia and in Africa and in the Middle East, walking around the streets in my little short miniskirts and my very American 60s, 70s, 80s experience. One of the things that I had to do to get by my issues, my own personal issues, is one, to remember what it felt like, even though it was temporary. Because I could escape that and come back to my little world that was all white and all privileged. But I did remember what it felt like to walk through a market in Cairo and not understand the language, and to see the looks from the people, to walk down a street in Bangkok and have groups of little boys follow you and point at you because they had never seen a female as tall as I was or as blonde. You didn't see American women in that part of the world at that time, and they would point at you because I was an Amazon. I was bizarre looking compared to any of their life experience. That still did not let me, or I still was unable to overcome my own internal prejudices and my own immediate reactions to many things. And it was something I had to work at and work at and work at. But one of the tools I used was to not be afraid to dislike somebody of color. And not because they were of color, but because their behavior, their personal behavior was what was wrong, not the color of their skin. I had to get by, stop feeling, I couldn't feel guilty any longer for disliking somebody different than me, not because of their differences, but because what they were doing was against everything that I had been brought up to believe was the correct way you treat people regardless of color. And I don't know whether that's a tool that will help us here in our little white nest of North Idaho, but it did help me.
Thank you. Can I ask you to make it quick? 1 and 2? And then we have to end.
I just feel like I just ended up here by just the act of God or something, but last night I watched a movie that my 17-year-old niece asked me to watch, Save the Last Dance. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it's an interracial relationship with high school children. And it was a really good movie, and then being here today, I just want to talk to her and find out what is going on with her. And, you know, she's blonde hair, blue-eyed, and down in San Diego, California, and it just, anyway, I don't know, I just felt like I'm really glad I was.
Pamela, one more here.
Yeah. So, thank you.
It's kind of hard for me to explain, and I don't want to scare people, but so many people mention about the anger. And I think that's really true. It's so hard to explain. I'm angry if people don't ask. But I'm angry if people say they understand, because they don't.
Thank you.
Anger is a big power. And that's part of me keeping myself like, I am like this, and I'm...
So, I get angry a lot when I feel people are not treating me right. Maybe because I speak this accent. Maybe I look really young. Maybe I have a small body. Maybe I was not born here. I'm not even American. I feel really angry. But at the same time, if people say, oh, I'm sorry, like I feel so bad, like it shouldn't be like that. I'll be mad. Because, oh yeah, so it's easy to say that. So what do you do? And when I feel this anger, that's kind of way I keep myself okay. That's the power around me. Because when I'm angry, like, I don't know, especially like in North Idaho, like Spokane, it's so hard to be different, not white. Because what I do can be really distinctive. And what I do, people think, oh, that's what Asian people do. It doesn't have to be me. So, I guess I always want to be like in a mainstream kind of thing, but I never can be. So, if I'm angry, it's a little bit easier for me to take it because I don't have to blame myself. I can blame outside things. And I need to work on that. But, and you know, like, I came to America like after I grew up, like when I was 21, almost 21 I came here. I've been here for 10 years. But like some people grow up like since that person was born and being minority and being in white culture and always being different. It's gonna be much more, much more experience than mine. And I don't like to say I understand because I don't understand them, I'm not them. But I think the anger can be really big, probably much bigger than mine. And I think we should understand, I cannot understand, but should know it. And people, I don't know, it's me, but if I had this anger, it's not like I like to be mad. I don't feel good, of course not. But I just need to be mad.
Hikaru, thank you so very much, because I often find that if there's a personal story that's shared that has even more impact than the video can have. So thank you for your courage in sharing this. And anger is a perfectly normal, acceptable emotion. And if you remember, one of the American Indian women in the video said, for many years it was my rage that kept me going. And I think that anger often forces us to act. And so thank you for sharing that. So I am going to hand you over to Jerry, who is going to say a few last words.
I also don't think that anger is very natural, that people would experience that who've been oppressed. How could you not be angry unless you were totally in denial of that experience? But I thank you all so much for being able to be here to watch the video and talk about the real experiences, because this is what we need to do more and more. Just to talk about quick business, we have 2 evaluation forms, and if you would just quickly raise your hand, if you're here for either the ESD or Gonzaga, would you raise your hand? And Doreen will give you one of those evaluations. And if you're here as anyone else, Marie will give you the evaluation. And I just want to end with we have some people here from the Spokesman Review, and this actually was in the Spokesman Review last week. We're going to give you a copy. It's called A Prayer for the World from Rabbi Harold Kushner. And he is the person who wrote the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Let the rain come and wash away the ancient grudges, the bitter hatreds held and nurtured over generations. Let the rain wash away the memory of the hurt, the neglect. Then let the sun come out and fill the sky with rainbows. Let the warmth of the sun heal us wherever we are broken. Let it burn away the fog so that we can see each other clearly, so that we can see beyond labels, beyond accents, gender, or skin color. Let the warmth and brightness of the sun melt our selfishness so that we can share the joys and feel the sorrows of our neighbors. And let the light of the sun be so strong that we will all see and see all people as our neighbors. Let the earth, nourished by rain, bring forth flowers to surround us with beauty. And let the mountains teach our hearts to reach upward to heaven. Amen.
I am Tony Stewart, and I want to close out this week by 2 or 3 comments. Number one is I want to say to those special people here who had the courage today and the bravery to express themselves, and the educator who has the 3 children, and the other comments that were made here just now. I just want to say to you, you remind me why we do this symposium. Just the comments made here today alone justify our year's work putting it together. Because if we can help just one person, and hopefully many more, to have a better life, that's what it's all about. And secondly, as Pamela and I were talking, if we can just raise the conscious level, where we get a little closer to that utopia where everyone treats everyone with dignity and self-respect and celebrates, not tolerating, but celebrates and accepts our great differences. And I want to say one little story that might be helpful to you in rearing children. And I'm certainly not an expert in that field, but I used to be president of the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment. And every governor had a representative on our board. And from one state, the governor had appointed a woman of color who was lesbian. And she was a person of great intellect, power, energy. And one of my great experiences in life, she said to me at a board meeting on a Friday, she said, I want to have breakfast with you tomorrow morning, but it must be a private breakfast. What an honor that was that she asked me. And at that breakfast, she shared with me, she'd grown up in St. Louis and now in the West. She shared with me her experience of life, and that almost every, as you were discussing, almost every day of her life, she had had one or more really difficult experiences. At one point, she almost lost her life as she was chased down the street by racist skinheads. And at that very time, she was working in the governor's office and on our board. And she said to me, I want to tell you how I have survived and how I have grown and how I have blossomed. And it was from one simple thing, and that's to your son. She said, every day of my life as I was growing up, when I'd come home from school, my father would put me on his lap and would always tell me how very special I was and that I had great things to do in life. And she said, that has carried me through my entire life. It is because of my father that I have the strength and the self-confidence that I have. And so after 33 years at the Popcorn Forum, over and over, we have these experiences where we think life is to be celebrated. And we have had over 100 presenters this week here in Gonzaga. And we've had 44 events, usually we have about 18. And so our audience got spread out over many, many days and many functions. And I kept saying, we're going to have a function, no one's going to show up. And yesterday at 2:30 in here, there was a good audience. Then last night from 4:30 to 6:30, there was another audience. They kept coming. And for you who have come, I have to suggest to you, you have been more empowered with your lives. You have more wisdom, more knowledge, and you have more strength. We have recorded everything, and we will invite you to read the journal when the Gonzaga University publishes it. They made a commitment they would publish it, so I'll be watching. They're a wonderful institute. And as we close, I want to particularly today thank Pamela and Jerry. They're very special. And I worked with Jerry for a year, with us putting together. Pamela, you are wonderful, and you're a new friend, and we'll come visit in Calgary, and we want you to come back here. With that, I want to thank you all. The success, even though these are great, great presenters, the success of the program is because you come. Without you, it's like a theater production. There's no play. So take care of yourself, and we hope to see you again next year.
On the back table, and thank you so much all of you.